Church, I'm so glad that you've made it to this part of our website, and in particular this video, which is a recording of our church family lunch on the 29th of May 2022, where we explored the question, why plant churches? This is a really, really important question and something we really would love you to engage with and ask more questions about as we explore why we might go on a journey towards planting a new worshiping community. There's lots of questions around this. There's lots of fears and questions of how and when and what and who and why. But starting with the question of why we might do this, why us as well, why not just someone else, is really, really important. And God willing, later this year, we'll have an opportunity to come together and to go, okay, are we going to do this? Are we going to put resources, including finance, that has been saved up over recent years? And so to get to that point, we need to be together on this journey as a church family. There's a few things we need to identify in the meantime, which we talk about in this recording. But in the meantime, you can actually watch this in under an hour if you click the YouTube cog and change it to 1.5 or 2 speed if you're time poor. But whatever we do, we'd just love you to listen through this and to submit and share any questions that you have arising from this as well. We'll have more opportunities to meet in the coming months, but in the meantime, enjoy this recording, and I hope it answers some of your questions and sparks more questions. Bless you. So welcome to everyone who's come this morning, this afternoon, and for anyone who's watching this recording later or is on Zoom right now, thanks for joining us as well. So I'm going to record this to be able to share with those who haven't been able to make it today. And I'm just going to start by sharing a few thoughts on what the purpose of this afternoon is, and then later I'll introduce to you Graham and Chris, who are with us, to share a few thoughts as well. So the topic for today is why plant churches. Fairly straightforward, and that's the journey that we're on at the moment. Is why should churches and others plant churches, and why would we consider that at this time? And you may have had a read of an article by Tim Keller, which we've got on our website at that link, the billabong.org.au/church planting, where we've been putting the journey so far and articles and events. So there's a great article by Tim Keller on this, which I really encourage you to read. That's on our website. He talks about that church plants are about being true to the Great Commission. Talks about they are best at reaching new generations and new residents in a new area. They're the best at reaching the unchurched, period. They help renew the whole body of Christ. They help identify and release leaders. They challenge other churches to self-examination. They end up blessing other churches in the process as kind of an evangelistic feeder. There's all sorts of reasons worth reading on Tim Keller's article. I've been reading a book called Church Plantology by Peyton Jones, and one really helpful observation in that book is that church planting is not church starting. So church starting, if you like, is find a logo and a name and do a letterbox drop and start a Sunday service and kind of build. So this was the first point where the Zoom connection dropped out. But basically we're just saying that church planting is not this sort of starter church where you just get a brand and a logo and find a building and you run programs and you letterbox drop. It's actually about, church planting is actually about building a worshiping community around the people you're trying to reach with the good news of Jesus and shaping it around that. That is the focus, making disciples. And so you heard a few things in the little city to city intro video earlier, but this session's about exploring that question more, why plant churches, and as part of that, hearing from our guests Graham Humphries and Chris Swann, who you'll meet later in the meeting, as well as James Duff, who's the Perth staff person for City to City. And so before we get to them and do the Q&A and everything in this session, the goal that I'm going to talk about now is about this part of the why us. So let's go back to the recording. I want to talk about this part of the why. Why is the Billabong exploring this, and what might it actually mean? So very well say we should plant churches and why we should, but Why not someone else? Why us? And in that, maybe a little bit of what we're actually talking about. Are we talking about buy land, build a new building? Are we talking about a new uniting church congregation with a new minister and all that kind of thing, or something different? So I want to share a little bit on the journey for me personally, which started probably more than 5 years ago. We'd moved into our community centre, which we're standing in now, and that was 15 years in the making. We grew a bit in late 2015, 2016. But we were seeing the exact same pattern in attendance and how many people called this church home as we'd seen since 2010 or even before. We'd kind of hit 110, 120 people on a Sunday. We'd grow to about maybe 180, even pushing 200 people who called this church home. And then it'd dip, and then we'd grow again, and then it'd drop. And it kind of go like that in a pattern multiple times over, which has continued for the last 6 years, and it was happening for probably the last 6 or 7 or 8 before that. And over that time, we've looked at lots of things. We looked at our pastoral care and our groups and the way we invest in kids and youth and our processes and the way we do serving teams and how we run Sundays, and all really, really important stuff. And some of that's been a really healthy and helpful, I think, process. But 11 and a half years into my time here, which is how long I've been at the Billabong now, one thing's really, really clear to me, and I think to our leadership team, and that is that the people of the Billabong love the small church family feel and experience, which is not a bad thing. There's this sense of desiring that community and being one kind of big family, or sort of medium-sized family, if you like. And we now have space for more people, that's for sure. Like, we could fit more people in the building on a Sunday, even with just one service. But it would fundamentally change the dynamics, and kind of break that 200 barrier, which some church leadership people talk about. Our team even did a course called Breaking the 200 Barrier by Kerry Newhoff, which is a pretty well-known resource out there now. And we did that, and there was some helpful stuff in it, but it was just really evident that parts of that at least is just not us. It's not something, it's not, going to work with the really deeply inbuilt DNA of our church family. But you pair that with a desire to, as our original vision statement said, know God, know our neighbours so our neighbours would know God, or as our current mission statement says, be disciples who make disciples. You pair that desire for the small church family experience and a desire to see people come to Jesus, and you see the problem. Every time someone comes to know the Lord and becomes part of the family, someone else gets pushed out or feels kind of like they're on the fringe now. So it's a challenge. So we explored, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to explore doing a second Sunday service. And I was saying, okay, we need to do this, all of these trends and things. This is going to be really helpful for us to make sure there's space for people. And to be honest, it's just not particularly exciting. And I was saying, yeah, we need to do this. And in my heart, I was like, I really don't want to do this. Just because it's kind of like, there's nothing kind of about it other than just trying to make more space, and that's about it. And of course, doubling all of the time it takes to run the Sunday and volunteers and all that. Then about 2.5 years ago, a number of things happened for me, just in my own experiences. God started to say some things in a real undeniable way, at least for me, that got me thinking at least about maybe we need to explore church planting in a neighbouring area, not just a second service. I was in a prayer meeting in Coburn with a number of pastors, and the words Joshua 13:6 came to my mind. And I don't know my Bible that well, so I looked up what is Joshua 13:6, and it's about God going before the Israelites into the land, preparing the land for them. I was at an event soon after where the speaker talked about having a vision for the land, not just a vision for your church. We all try to do a vision statement for our church. We actually need a vision for the land that God, that is God's and there are people there. One morning after our local pastors' prayer meeting, we were talking about, connecting with each other, and I was just interested, are there any churches just in that sort of south area of here, Piara Waters, Harrisdale, that we haven't connected with yet as local pastors
because they don't have a network down there. Maybe we just need to make an effort to reach out. So I Googled churches in that area, and other than Carey, Harrisdale, and then south of that, Carey, Forestdale, I found there were no churches.
The recording cut out at this point, but basically I was saying that there was only one small church meeting in a local high school in this area of Harrisdale, Piara Waters, apart from Carey down in Forestdale and top of Harrisdale. In comparison to a similar sized area of Canning Vale, where we are, where there's about 15 churches. As I was looking at this that same day, this happened.
That same night, the Uniting Church wiped our debt after of $2.4 million after having a conversation about how to treat that backlog. David de Kock preached a few weeks later and said this in a sermon at the Billabong.
Who have made gifts to the church and have said, I'm going on to be with Jesus, and I have X dollars left. I want to give that, or some of that, which I don't give to my family, to the church. And out of that, the church has built up an amount of money from which it earns an interest. Now, it's taken $2.4 million of that capital, and it said, Billabong, we believe that your mission would be freed if you no longer had this debt. Is that good news? Absolutely, it is good news. But there's another part to that, because this is, you see, we can get the stuff, but we also need to act. Their trust, those people who decided to write off that debt, are trusting that you, the people of this congregation, will take that gift and use your new debtless freedom to multiply for the kingdom of God.
That was October 2019. So for me, it was beginning to be impossible to kind of ignore what God seemed to be nudging at. So it was like, okay, but I had no idea about church planting, other than the fact that the Billabong, a church plant in 2000, 22 years ago, was a great success story, but Mark and Deb felt that if they'd had their time again, they would have done a million things differently, knowing what we know today. So I just sort of started praying a few years ago and driving around the areas south of Canning Vale, observing things. I had my sabbatical in 2020, did lots of just walking around Piara Waters, Harrisdale, that kind of area. Our team talked about it. We flagged it early last year, but it was really early on, and we were had other focused priorities. We were working on life groups and that kind of thing. And then early this year, we came back to this conversation and said, okay, there's still lots of questions, still lots of stuff we need to explore, and lots of fears. But one, it seems like God's speaking, and two, it seems like there are really solid reasons to plant a church in general. So let's have a think about this and explore this more substantially. So that brings us to today. Exploring what are those reasons, why plant churches, why us. And before we go to Graham, a couple of things might be helpful to go, well, all right, but why do what? What are we talking about when we talk about the Billabong potentially planting? And so I'll just go through this quickly because it might help raise a few questions up front rather than thinking there's certain things we might be heading towards, which we most certainly won't. So firstly, we're not talking about buying land and building a building. If we can convince the Uniting Church to invest down south for 5, 10, 15 years' time, great, awesome. They can go buy land and we'll move into it one day. But that's like not even close to step one on this journey. That's like maybe, a long time away. We're not talking about a carbon copy of this congregation in Canning Vale. Ultimately, church plants are about reaching people with the gospel, making disciples. So as a team researches the area that we plant into, the demographics, the needs, the passions, the intricacies of the area, that will shape what the church looks like, when it worships, how it worships, what activities it does. It won't just be a carbon copy of the Billabong in Canning Vale. The plant would be part of the Billabong family, though. We're not talking, for good reasons, about a completely autonomous congregation who need their own eldership and their own governance and finance and all of that. Because that, whilst it could come later, it makes the most sense that this is part of the Billabong family. It's a second campus, it's a second location that we would review another, down the track. So the leader would be part of our leadership team, that we'd work closely together. We'd have special family gatherings together rather than just sending some people off and going, have fun, we'll see you, in the resurrection or something. It may start small. It's not like we're expecting 50% of people to just kind of uproot and go, okay, see you later, and 50% left behind here. It may be 20 or 30 people, including kids. Could be a bit less, could be a bit more. We don't know for sure, but it may be quite a small thing to begin with. It won't start this year. If it feels like, oh, wow, we're moving forward quickly. Well, even if we made a commitment by, say, September or October to commission a leader and invest some money and say, let's do this, there's still a minimum 6-month period of developing a team and praying and preparing and getting training for the leader. And usually this would be called launch phase. So if you track forward from, even if it was September this year, Easter next year, the very earliest, before a Sunday morning happens or activities are off the ground and it's officially launched. Speaking of the leader, this is a really key one. Until we've identified who would lead this, we won't even be entering launch phase, because you can't call a team together and come on, come be part of this. Like, who's going to actually head it up? Who's going to lead the team to go and plan? So if that takes another 6 months to identify that person, then the launch phase after that, then we're still some way off. So that's a key thing in the journey at the moment. And finally, probably not talking about trying to find someone from outside to come and lead the plan. The leadership team really feel like, identifying and sending a leader or a couple from within the Billabong who carry our DNA, align with our vision, align with the mission of this church. That's a really important thing. It's not out of the question altogether that someone who just gels perfectly comes in from outside, but it's quite unlikely. So really we're looking at someone who's called, has the character, the competency, and of course is willing to be equipped along the way. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what this might look like and probably what it won't look like, just for clarification, before kind of assuming, oh, well, this is going to be about, buying land and all that kind of thing. So that's all from me, which means it's now my pleasure to introduce. You there, Graham? All working?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. So Graham is from the Uniting Church in South Australia. He's the chair of Generate Presbytery, which is a presbytery, a family of churches in the Uniting Church in South Australia of about 150 congregations now, Graham?
118.
118, who have a real heart for discipleship, for raising leaders, for church planting. There's a number of church plants in their presbytery. But Graham is currently the chair of Generate, and he has been involved in raising up church planters in their synod in South Australia. Currently is involved in a church plant, has been involved in others before, and is just going to share with us a bit this morning. So thank you so much, Graham, for joining us. Sorry, this afternoon, not this morning. Can you just tell us a bit about your work with the Uniting Church and when it comes to church planning, what you're doing now, and that'd be great.
Sure. And look, the sound's been breaking up a bit from my end, so if I just freeze or something, just yell out, just wave at me or something, and I'll stop. Thanks for the opportunity of sharing. Just briefly, most of my ministry has been in congregations, 10 years in rural congregations, but I was the lead pastor at Seeds Uniting Church, which was called Aberfoyle when I was there, but it was Seeds Uniting Church. And I recall around about 2000, Seeds Uniting Church, we actually bought a lawnmower for Billabong when it was just starting. So we do have a little bit of a connection. I've always had a passion for evangelism, but I generally look at the Uniting Church, and even our best churches are adding 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people a year. And I thought, how can we actually start exponentially growing and reaching people and making disciples? So that started my passion for church planting. While I was at Seeds, we did a second campus, which we might talk about later. And then I became a part-time role as church planting officer for the synod. There wasn't a lot happening in church planting, so it was really trying to change the culture of the Uniting Church. So I read a lot, looked at the benefits, talked to effective church planters across denominations, led some seminars at synod about why we should plant churches. And then we started training church planters. So we ran a week-long seminar on training church planters. And the first one we did, we had 30 people attend. And we've started planting churches of various types. Some are campuses, some are startups, some are regenerations. And we've probably done 7 or 8 in the last 4 or 5 years now in South Australia. And just to round it off, at the same time, I felt I needed not just to talk about church planting, but to model it. So almost 4 years ago, 6 of us got together. We felt called to start a church from absolutely nothing at all. We had no money, no people, no staff, no venue. So we started what we call a value-driven church. We had 5 clear values. We started that church 3.5 years ago, focusing on hospitality, generosity, being relational, and basically bringing people to Jesus. 4 years on, we still have no venue. Even the school we were in, we couldn't use for many months. So in January, February, we became an open air church. We met on an oval in the open air, which was a bit different. But it's like lots of things. We're probably averaging about 70 people attending now. And it certainly has highs and lows, but that's just a little bit about what I've been doing.
Great. What's been some of the key lessons, key challenges in church planting with the Mitcham Hills experience at the moment that you're part of? Says that's most fresh in your mind.
Yeah. Look, the phrase I use all the time is church planting is an adventure of joy. It's an adventure, which means it's exciting, frustrating, challenging, you name it. But underneath it all, there's an incredible joy. And I think mission, we obey the Great Commission, that's a command, but it's always underneath it got an element of joy. And whenever we see people's lives changed, it's absolutely, I think of a young girl who came to us, and my wife and I just happened to pray with her, and she came and she said, I've got a broken heart. And so we prayed with her, and she's been coming along. Last year she was baptized. She's just a new person. She's got married and involved in the church. So the first thing I'd say is church planting is an adventure with lots of hard work, but it's incredibly joyful. Secondly, I'd say one of the big lessons I think is you've got to feel called by God. Call is absolutely crucial because you've got to know why you are doing this. You know, we spend a lot of time, what are we going to do? What sort of church? It's the why that's the key thing. We're doing this to reach more people for Jesus and because God's called us. Another couple of things, look, evangelism is really tough in Australia, but we've got to do it. But it's incredibly joyful when you see somebody become a disciple. A guy I'm relating to at the moment, he came to us 3 years ago on Father's Day. He walked in the church feeling quite nervous, and I said hi, and he said, look, I'm not the religious type. And so we said, fine, we don't think we're that religious here anyway. Now, his name's Kevin. Kevin has been coming pretty much every week for 3 years. He's done the Alpha course. He's read the whole Bible through from cover to cover. He serves in lots of areas. And I'd like to say now, and he's received Jesus and he's an active disciple. He would say himself, he's not a follower of Jesus yet, but he's on the journey. And it's a joy meeting him and helping him discover. And we're praying that in the near future, he will sort of step across the line. One of the things we've also learned is we decided not to have members of the church. We decided to have partners. We talk about if you're a member of the golf club, you turn up on a Saturday, you play golf, you enjoy it, you pay your fees, but you don't want to do any work. You don't want to mow the lawns on the greens or anything. You just want to turn up. So we've deliberately said we only want partners because we want people who are involved. Because when you do a church plant, there's lots of things to do. You need every hands on deck. Venue is a big challenge, bigger than I thought. So we're still homeless and we have to move around a lot. So we're thinking of making one of our values, if you can find where we are, you're welcome to join us, because we're all over the place. So that's impacted us a little bit. And lastly, I'd say we're all volunteers at Mitcham Hills. So it's a different model, which I'm not saying is the best model, it's just different. So our core leadership team, we're all volunteers. And because we've got other jobs, to be honest, that probably affects us significantly in our growth and planning, because we're not thinking 24/7 about the church. So there are lots of things. It's a joy. We've got the usual frustrations.
Thanks for giving us a bit of an insight. So my understanding is that Mitcham Hills was born when a group of people who were starting to explore church planting were planning and praying, and some of those groups had one kind of direction they wanted to go, and others, including yourself, had sort of another direction. And so two church plants were born out of that. Some of us have heard from Mike, who pastors that other church, which is fantastic. Different models, different ways of going. But that's those two church plants, Mitcham Hills and Encounter, is it? Came out of a group of people praying and exploring together. But you've also been part of a plant which was a new location from an existing uniting church, if I understand correctly. So Seeds started a new location. Tell us about that, because that's sort of probably more in the line of what we're exploring.
Sure. Around 2000, look, by the grace of God, Seeds Church grew while I was there for the 16 years. We went from, when I went there, it was about 180 people, and around 2000, it was about 950 people. We had done multiple extensions of the building to fit everybody in. We were running 3 services, a Saturday night service and 2 Sunday morning services, which were all identical. Same preaching, same team, everything was identical. And we were full. And I remember vividly, the elders and I sat at the back of the church praying one day, and we were praying, do we need to extend the building yet again and have an appeal for money? And we believe God spoke to us, not in an audible voice, but in a very clear voice, to say, you know what, if you start planting churches, you can reach more people, you don't have to keep doing extensions, and there's a whole lot of benefits. And so that was the start of our church planting journey. It probably took us after that 18 months to actually plant a church. The first thing we did, as you said before, we picked a leader. Now, we actually advertised for a leader, and we had 2 internal people apply and 1 external apply, and we actually chose the external person because they gelled, as you put it, Luke, gelled perfectly with what we wanted to do. But I'm not recommending that and saying it's the right thing to do. I think you're going along the right path. But for us, we picked an outside, and we picked them because we could see they carried the Seeds DNA anyway. And the leader was the key. So we assess the person internally, but we also do an external assessment through Lifeway. We began building a team, and we stressed to the church, we're not losing people when we do a church plant, we're sending people. And I think those words were really helpful. It had the same vision and values, but the finance and administration were run centrally. The venue was a bit of a challenge. We ended up, the campus started meeting in a pub, probably half an hour south of us. The pub were very good. They gave us a big room above their pokies, where we could meet as a church. So it's probably one of the few churches you could hear the pokies going in between Shine, Jesus, Shine and different songs that we were singing. And it was incredibly exciting, the church. We probably sent 30 to 40 people. And rather quickly, the church grew to 100, 120. And we had the right people, the right leader, and they were very well supported by the central church seats. Now, we made a few mistakes. We'd do things differently, but it was a very positive thing.
What were some of the impacts on seeds, the sending mum church?
Yeah. I think, first of all, it reminded people about an outward focus. It's not all about us. And even though seeds were still growing and had grown pretty rapidly to 950 people, there was still a significant element in the church of the church is for me, what's best for me, a bit like the elder brother and the prodigal son. You know, so there was still a significant element of that. This actually made people focus a little bit outward. It actually, because we sent 30 people, some of our really good leaders, it freed up space for other people to step up and mobilize people who probably wouldn't have got a Guernsey in various leadership roles. So it spread the leadership. Honestly, I wish we'd done it 5 or 6 years earlier. That is, honestly, we could have then done one every 3 years. We lost some of our good givers, but probably in 18 months, we regained as many people and we regained all of the offerings.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, it's just good to hear about those different experiences. But all in all, just I'm going to be careful of time here so we can do some Q&A. What do you think, why do you think uniting churches need to plant churches? Now, whatever the model, why do you think we plant churches?
I need to be careful here, Luke, because I've done a number of seminars on this topic. I could talk for half an hour. I'll talk for a minute or so. The bottom line is we need to plant churches because people out there need to hear about Jesus. We're called to go and make disciples, and as long as there's 1, 2, 3 people in our community who don't know Jesus, we've got to start looking at the best and most effective ways for sharing Jesus. And there is no doubt one of the most effective ways of reaching new people is by planting a church. Even studies of the NCLS and things, new churches tend to grow a lot faster than established churches. They reach more non-Christians. I think the NCLS a few years ago said 17% of newcomers in church plants, 17% of people in church plants are newcomers. It's less than 7 in normal churches. They attract younger people, particularly the Uniting Church is a very old demographic. Church plants tend to attract a lot more people in the ages of 15 to 40. They mobilize people. People actually get off and start doing things. And lastly, I'd say most churches tend to plateau after a while, but planting a new church sort of regains momentum. So the bottom line is the Uniting Church needs to be in church planting because people out there need Jesus, and this is the most effective way to reach them.
Cool, thank you. So we're going to do some Q&A. So if you have a question for Graham, we're going to go to Chris in a little while, and we'll do more Q&A with him. But just on Graham's time, yeah, if you have a question for Graham, I mean, I have one in my mind, but yeah, Dean.
Okay, I'm actually from Adelaide originally, so I'm very interested in a few things like geography and those sort of things, but I'm sure I can sort that out at other times. The thing I'm interested in is, did you go and what was your strategy for trying to understand the communities you were planting into?
I didn't hear all of that, Dean, but I think the question was, did we try and understand the community we were planting into?
And what was the strategy for doing that?
A couple of different things we did at Aberfoyle, and One was obviously you get the demographics of the area. Where we planted from seeds was a slightly lower socioeconomic area. So you get the demographics, but we're very positive about actually doing a bit of door knocking and just actually talking to some real people in the real area. So you have a face-to-face contact, and you're not doing a door knock to ask them to church. You're just doing a door knock to just find out some of who they are and some of their hopes and dreams and things like that. So it's critically important to understand the community that you can't just replicate everything. You need to adapt. And so that's what we tried to do. So it was a similar community, but probably for the church we planted was down at Seaford, which is sort of outer suburban new housing development.
Thank you.
How many ordained people started the church plant or were in the church plant, as opposed to non-ordained?
Yep, sure. The church plant we did from seeds, the lead pastor happened to be ordained. I don't think it would have mattered whether they were ordained or not. So there's only one ordained person in the church plant. When we did the one at Mitcham Hills, I'm ordained and I'm on the leadership team, but that's more by accident than anything else. Seeds is about to do another church plant and they're picking a lay person and his wife to lead. So just for us, whether the person's ordained or not was not an issue. It's more that whether they were called and gifted. And in South Australia, I don't know what you're doing. It's quite easy for someone to become a ministry of pastor. And many of our church planters, we've probably done 7 or 8 church plants, and probably 2 of them are led by ordained people. The rest are led by lay people who are ministry of pastors. We're looking for gifts and call.
Hi, sorry. I find it really inspiring to hear about the seed and everything that is really successful church plants, but I was wondering if you've had any that have been unsuccessful.
Yes. Thanks, that's a great question. Look, we have. So we've started 7 or 8. We had a young couple probably 3 years ago try and start a church plant in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. And this was, again, a startup from nothing at all. It was a couple with another couple that felt called to plant a church. So they worked at getting that off the ground for probably a year. And then they came to see me and they just felt it wasn't the right time, it wasn't working. And we basically closed it. And to be honest with you, I met with a couple and I said, this is not a failure. This is, you've had a go, and at this point in time, it hasn't worked. I believe that couple will plant another church in the near future. But for all intents and purposes, the one they started, we recognise it as a church plant, as a faith community, which is the way we operate. But in 12 months, we closed it as a faith community. Yeah, and it doesn't exist anymore. And we'd given them some money to start it and they handed the money back. And I thought it was a very healthy thing for them to do. And people say failure is not an option. I say having a go is not an option. And it's okay to fail. It's fine. We try something, we learn from it, and we move on.
Well, thank you so much, Graham. Really appreciate your time, and you're certainly welcome to hang around if you like, but no worries if you need to head off.
I do need to head off, sorry.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say? If not, thanks very much. But
just to say again, our motto across our church plants is it's an adventure of joy. It's incredibly challenging. It's can be hard work. It can be all, but there is nothing more joyful than reaching people for Jesus and seeing their lives changed. And church planting is one of the most effective ways of doing that. And if particularly it's easy for churches to plateau and we believe starting new churches is very biblical and theological, but it's also pretty exciting and challenging.
Cool. Thanks so much, mate. And appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Thanks, Luke.
Cool. So great segue, I think, into our next guest is Chris Swann. So Chris is from City to City, and City to City, you saw a little video in the celebration earlier about what City to City do, and they help churches to plant churches and leaders and train them up and all that kind of thing. Why is it important that we have some sort of a relationship with an organisation with City to City? Well, Rachel's excellent question about what about those that fail. 1 in 7 do fail. Sorry, 1 in 7 don't fail. 6 in 7 church plants don't work. They don't get off the ground. They don't actually have longevity unless they're partnered with and being trained by an organisation, a reputable organisation that equips church planters and trains churches to plant churches, in which case the statistics are reversed. 6 in 7 work and succeed. So that is the bottom line statistics that basically mean it is an absolute no-brainer to get help, to get to know people like Chris and James and Andrew, the CEO we had coffee with a little while ago, and just get you guys to help us in the journey at every stage in the journey. So thanks, Chris, for being here. Before you share, I want to actually play a clip, which is from a webinar that we did with City to City. Like a few of us joined in on the Shahis, myself, Cameron, and Annalise, just to hear from church planters and this same topic of why plant churches. And I hope you don't mind this, Chris, but I've taken a little clip from the middle when I asked a question, because I thought that the answer around the question of what it did for the home church, the sending churches, was really good, and that your input was really good and challenging as well. So yeah, this is just a 5-minute clip from our webinar from a few weeks ago.
Question from Luke already in the chat from the Billabong in Perth. Love to hear about the impact we've seen church planting have on existing churches who decide to send a group out to plant in another geographic location. Any of our speakers, maybe Benji can put us all in a kind of group in the middle of the screen so that we can see each of those who've shared earlier. And anyone want to speak to this? I mean, many of you have been part of being sent out by churches. What's been the impact on the sending church, the church that's got behind and blessed and released you for this?
So my boss, Jonathan, did a whole bunch of research on this because he wanted to make sure that the mum church was taken care of. And one of the things that he discovered in kind of talking to churches that have done this before is that it kind of it exposes a lack of discipleship in the mum church, which is a good thing because it shows where there are gaps, and it gives you a chance to kind of work on those things for next time. But also the impact was the church entirely backfilled within 1 week of us leaving. So people who were maybe less frequent attenders started becoming regular attenders, and there was just, people felt like there was space, and so all of a sudden there were new people there. So they really didn't miss us, which was kind of beautiful.
Any others have experiences you'd like to share, John or Caroline, Brendan, even from what you've seen in other contexts?
We're kind of like young adults who are yet to move out of home, so we're kind of in that stage. But something that I've observed, and that our team's observed, is that the process of praying for and preparing and sending out a plant has actually really helped to raise the missional and the evangelistic temperature of our sending church. And so people feel that sense of, hey, we're on mission together. There's a sense of urgency. People need to know about Jesus, and people are hearing about Jesus, and so there's a greater sense of participation from the whole congregation and the whole church family, rather than that just being something that's happening over there that's separate to us. And so bringing people along for the journey has been a really enriching experience for everyone.
Yeah, I would just add to that we're similar. We're young adults who haven't moved out of home, although we do 2 Sundays a month. 2 Sundays a month we meet with mum and dad, but 2 Sundays a month we're on our own, and then during the week as well. But yeah, it definitely does heighten the temperature for evangelism and missional discipleship within mum church. But also something that I'm seeing is it gets people within the mum church to start thinking about, oh, do I have a church in me? If they can do it, we can do it. So that's sort of where we're at, and that's quite exciting.
Mm-hmm. I'd just share from my observation and speaking with different sending churches and church planters around Australia. There is, I don't want to oversell it. Like, you've heard about the wonderful kind of raising of the missional temperature and opportunities for discipleship, and how the Lord raises up new leaders in the sending church. And that does happen, but it often happens with pain and grief, because it is a loss to send people out, people you've loved, and perhaps even particularly intensely loved. And so you don't want to undersell that, particularly because that actually, like for a new church plant, where there's often a sense of increased kind of dependence on God, there's a sort of maybe even fragility and a sort of desperation that drives you in the right circumstances to pray and to rely on God and to get about the task of mission and of sharing the gospel and serving your community. That just like that kind of pressure can move in really helpful directions for a church plant, the pressure and pain of sending out and losing is the thing that often is the catalyst for growth within the existing church. So you've got to have a kind of both end, I think, because you don't want to pretend that it's all just beautiful and wonderful and everyone's like, oh, go, off you go, wonderful, yay.
Our best evangelists have just left.
So look, I found that really helpful, Chris, because it's good not to sugarcoat it and go, oh yeah, this is wonderful. And at the same time, those stories like, the mother church completely backfilling within a week, you just think, wow, you don't think about that kind of stuff. So it's really good. So thank you for being here. I forget your exact title, but it's coaching and training and development, something like that. So Chris actually trains up church planters, does things like called a residency, works with new planters for a whole year and then beyond that as well. So really grateful to have you here, Chris. I might need to turn that down just a little bit. Why don't you just share with us a little bit about what you do and why it is that you guys are so passionate about raising up leaders in churches to plant churches, and just tell us whatever you think would be helpful to share.
Yeah, sure. Really, just great to be here and privileged to share with you. I'm the director of church planting for City to City, and so that means I get to work with church planters across the country. Luke's mentioned we have some cohorts that in a particularly intense way in the first sort of year or so of a church plant. We walk alongside and really help them in that kind of launch phase or the early phase. I mean, and this is one of the interesting things, because different kinds of churches in different contexts with different planters and teams leading them, because they kind of are all different, we get a real mix, right? And so sometimes in cohorts we've had everything from a Korean church plant that turns out if you want to plant a Korean church, you need to start a worship service first. That's the first thing to do, so that other Korean Christians who might join with you, you're not a thing that they could join and commit to until you've got a worship service going. And so, that, I guess, changes all their dynamics of that. They don't have a team other than their family, if they have one, until they've started, all the way through to churches that are they're never going to kind of gather and have big kind of celebration all together moments. Their plan is to be small house churches that multiply. And I get to kind of sit with all of them and help them, in a sense, find a sense of community, to pray for each other, to help each other, to work together on common challenges, and they discover often they have lots more in common than you might think, and to really not create the average sort of church from all that. And there's some church planting agencies that really do they say there's one particular way of approaching a church plant that we think works, and they sort of structure everything around enabling that and supporting that, down to the level of having like an Asana kind of project management project where you just plug in your church plant name and your start date, and then it gives you all the steps and you tick them off. But we kind of work actually with just too much variety for that in different places, and that's a real joy. That's something that because there's the churches that are needed to be planted in Canning Vale are different from the churches that need to be planted in Cottesloe, and different in Willagee from West Perth, right? Because the people are different there. There are just different people, different often demographically, or at least a distinct population. Secondly, though, they're different in the kind of way they live, their sort of daily rhythms and routines. Is it a sleeper suburb where people they're there, but they don't work there and they don't play there, even if they get the choice on the weekends, they head elsewhere, and that's a whole different thing to reach people in that sort of context than a place where people live and work and play, because they want to be there and they choose to be there and they're able to be there. And so, the way how people live and what they love and value are all different in different places. And the opportunities are different as well. And spiritually, the temperature is different. There are different sort of hostilities and resistances in different places, different idols, different like kind of things that just shape people's whole lives at a really deep level. The loves that they orbit around, whether it's family or success and career or the kind of lifestyle. And so different churches are needed in different places to actually reach those different people who live and function differently. And it's kind of one of my great thrills, is to get to walk alongside people and help people in different places, even via Zoom across the other side of the continent.
Yeah, good. Same question as I asked Graham before, and what we've sort of said is the theme. Why plant churches? Now, you may want to speak to that from a theological and just what do they really do, but also maybe from a statistics and what you guys have seen and experienced as a church planting training organisation. So yeah, why should we plant churches?
Yeah. It's the right question to wrestle with. I mean, statistically speaking, we talk about there's a key point in a group of people, say a population of 1,000, which would be often less than even a suburb, right? Maybe a few blocks, where you reach when you hit kind of 10 to 15% of that population who are, active, church-going, committed Christians, you hit what some people describe as gospel saturation, where that kind of population, that geographical area or that network of people has enough kind of openly Christian people in it that people can't help but interact with them in everyday life. Right? They're sort of unignorable. I think that was the thing in the video that it talks about. But just that's not just a statistical reality. This is real people's lives, right? That you're actually able to show people the Christian message and the reality of faith and Jesus as Lord who transforms people. You can show them that and not just tell them about it, because they keep running into Christians. They run into Christians when they do their shopping, and they run into Christians when they are at the park with their kids, and all those kind of ordinary contexts are bumping up against Christians, and usually not just one, right? But they experience the Christian message through relationships and community, not just individually. So they can't just say, oh yeah, that's Luke. He is a Christian, but he's a good sort of Christian. But they can't say that when they've got well, there's Luke and there's Jessica and they just 20 people or something that they know from ordinary life in lots of different contexts, and it's like, oh, maybe it's not the exceptional Christian that's okay and got something different about them. Maybe it's maybe it's Christianity, maybe it's the church itself, maybe this is worth checking out. And so it can have a real impact on the spiritual temperature of a place to see that hitting that gospel saturation. And you just, like, actually, you don't live everywhere, and you can't bring a whole community of people everywhere other than by church planting, right? And by moving in and being in the neighborhood and living life in that context as a Christian.
Yeah. So I think a question that's certainly been in my mind for a long time, and I'm sure I've heard other people say it as well, is, okay, that's all very well, but so the Billabong is, 150, 180 odd people, including, kids and stuff. There's half a dozen, maybe a dozen other churches in this area, some tiny bit bigger, some a little bit smaller. Yes, there's a couple of mega churches on our doorstep, but a lot of them reach the wider Perth. Surely, with that number of Christians, there's still plenty of non-Christians to reach with the existing churches. Why, for that gospel saturation, do we need church plants? I think that's a big question in my mind, and a lot of people's mind. What's the significance about church plants that help us to reach the unchurched?
Yeah, I mean, again, good question. I think even with the existing churches, there's almost nowhere in Australia that's anywhere near that 10% kind of number, right? So there's just everything's going to need to go way better than it is and grow way bigger than it is, or we need a lot more churches. And actually, the reality is probably both. I think, some of the things Graham mentioned about the stats around newer churches. So there's in addition to the things you would have read in that Tim Keller article, there's the NCLS stats on the kind of evangelistic fruitfulness of newer churches. There's kind of, they talk about a category of, they call newcomers, who are people who, when they do that National Church Life survey, that in the previous period, the 5 years previously, they weren't involved in church, whether they may never have been involved, or they may have sort of dropped off and they've re-engaged after at least 5 years. And that number in newer churches that are 5 years old and less, is double the national average. So the national average is kind of down around 5% for that number of newcomers in a church community, and that's the national average, right? And so I speak and work with people in different denominations where that percentage it's not 5%, it's 1 or 2%, right? And so then church plants are up on average around 10% of newcomers. This is kind of evangelistic fruit from this. The other thing to say is, I guess, different kinds of church plants have, and there's again research around this, mostly out of the US, have the ability to kind of get into different populations where there's just people who are really far from the Lord and don't really have a lot of opportunity to connect with Christians, and wouldn't perhaps be able to walk into, would never cross the threshold of an ordinary church building to connect with a community of Christians. And so being able to sort of follow some of those, the way relationships work and follow the seams of kind of how people connect with each other, getting new things happening, and new Christians going in, not just as a one person and maybe be able to be written off as, well, they're just different, but groups of Christians, Christians who can show the gospel in their lives and relationships and serve together and have a kind of be more together by expressing the reality of being a body than they can be individually, is just, there's nothing that beats it, and it's just it's absolutely necessary to be able to get, and this is, I live in Melbourne. I'm an inner city kind of guy, bookish, Anglican, understated, right? And I just can't reach the people that my Pentecostal friend in the western suburbs of Melbourne in a blue collar area is reaching, and their church is connecting with people that I could, and it would take a serious amount of crucifying of my own personality, and even then I doubt that actually they'd right. And so we just need different kinds of people to do it with, who are shaped and fit in different contexts, and God's going to open different doors for. And we need lots and lots of that, because and even if we do hit 10% or 15% of a population area, that's 10 or 15%. There's a lot more people in that context who need to know Christ, and yeah.
Cool, thank you. Now we're wide open. We can. I'm happy to ask some more questions, but if anyone else has got a question at this point for Chris.
Is there a sense in which church plant is an opportunity to relocalise the church again? Every church tends to start to draw people from a wide range.
Yeah, that's a great question, and 100%. That is a really key opportunity that church planting opens up, because partly there's a book actually called "Church Planting is for Wimps," and that's about kind of attempting to go into an existing church that maybe has lost touch with its local context and population, maybe looks quite different than the because of demographic change or whatever, and to lead that through a process of change is really hard, like really, really hard, because you're fighting against an established culture as well as trying to work out how do we connect with people who are here, and so church planting is a terrific opportunity actually to do that with less of that having to work with the established culture and change it and shift it. Yeah, great.
Hi, I was just wondering, when Graham spoke earlier, he was talking about how some churches that he's planted have been led by ordained and some by lay people. I was wondering, with your experiences seeing a lot of church plants, what the difference has been.
How do I say this without being rude to ordained people, of which I'm one? Often, just innovation happen and be driven by often people who they're not ordained, maybe they haven't come through typical pathways, maybe they're younger. There's often an openness to try new things. They're often in closer connection with the culture of the people they're seeking to reach out to. So often actually been more, if it needs the right kind of support and coaching and support, wrapping around that, people to walk alongside them, and what is it the proverb says about grey hair is the crown of wisdom, but the kind of strength of youth is and there's just, you kind of need both, and I think the sort of non-ordained thing can really, there can often be a lot of vision and energy that can drive in that is, we just need to release in the church, and old, slow, ordained people like me getting out of the way and coming alongside younger people is, I think there's a lot of, I have a lot of hope for that, and see that sort of thing happening. Certainly, because we work across lots of different denominations, and there's some where this is especially true, right? Where to get ordained, you need to spend multiple years living in the one city where they have the seminary, and you don't, they're not particularly training you about mission and making disciples. Yeah, they're training you to run established churches, and so actually all the church plants that are happening in that particular denomination are being led by non-ordained people, because just they're local, they get it, they have friends who aren't believers, they get going, and if the ordained people in the churches, the established churches, can get around them and steer them and support them in different ways, then that can be, we can sort out the authorization piece down the track, I guess, is and it depends a little on your context and denomination, I guess.
Speak for yourself. I don't think I'm old and sweat just yet, but maybe not. I'm not sure. Just to follow on from that, obviously, all of that being said, training and being equipped for this is obviously an absolutely key piece. So, you know, why is it, do you think, that the tables are completely turned from 1 in 7 succeed to 6 in 7 succeed when a plant, leaders of that plant partner with an organisation like City to City? I mean, why is it such a substantial gap in just the statistics of which ones actually, you know, get grounded and go forward?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a variety of factors. We do assessment, and so we're trying to actually work out with someone who may say, "Look, I'm really excited, and I want to plant a church, and I think God wants me to do this," and to go, "Okay, let's slow that down. Let's help you discern. Let's weigh this up. Let's get some insight from research that's been done about the kinds of capabilities and the character and actually work out, are you called to this?" And so it's not just something that I wake up tomorrow and go, "You know what, I think I should plant a church," and off I go. I think that there is a degree of sort of screening, and even because it's not tremendously burdensome, but there is some degree of process and scrutiny that I think can be a good thing, right? To say, am I someone who's willing to do this, to do it, not, and actually say, are there other people around who see this and can get behind this? It also, the way we do assessment has a big emphasis on ensuring we develop people well. So actually say, what are your strengths? How do we help you lean into those? Is there a particular model of church planting that would be better? Or are there people you're going to need on your team to offset things? And actually, so it's not just a screening piece, but a key aspect of developing and investing well in people. I mean, we have a big emphasis as well in all of our kind of training and coaching on formation, so that the plant, because you're just subjected to particular pressures and often put in a situation that doesn't have always the same degree of structure and scrutiny as an established ministry context. And that can be really good for enabling innovation, but it can also be problematic potentially. And so we want to really make sure people are prioritizing their own walk with the Lord, making sure that what God is doing in them is not outpaced by what God does through them or might do through them, which I think, we know the scandals in all sorts of contexts around the world in churches. The theme I see again and again is that people are kind of neglecting what God is doing in them and calling them to individually, because they've got a big ministry to have and a big impact to have. And so we just emphasize that. We have a 2-week church planting intensive. Almost the entire first week is about that and equipping you with that and emphasizing that and giving you practices and tools to work that in and keep that as a point of focus. And at the same time, that's the thing we keep coming back to as well. So when we train church planters in delegation as they work with a team, there's all sorts of theory we could give you, go and read this book and maybe learn some skills and whatever. But in the end, actually probably what gets in most church leaders' way when it comes to delegation is not knowing the theory or not having the skills. It's that just really like to be in control of the outcomes and have them match their preferences and maybe micromanage therefore as a result. And so they get in their own way and stuff in themselves gets in their own way in their heart. And so the formation piece and going, how can I actually apply the spiritual resources of the gospel and what Christ has done and taking hold of the identity that God has won for me in Christ? How can that free me from needing to be in control so that I can actually delegate well and I can raise up and empower a team and not disempower them? And so that kind of, yes, that's the sort of way we would sort of look to wrap around planters. And I think that in the end makes a much bigger difference than, just winding them up and saying, go for it. Or even, perhaps just leave people to work out, well, what do I think I need? And I'll just take hold of my, because you don't always know. You're not always aware of where your particular needs or strengths or weaknesses are. And so being able to do that in a community with the wisdom of gathered experience, and we're plugged in as City. It's an international network, and so we're not just hearing and learning things here in Australia, but elsewhere as well, and able to take tools and practices and share stories that help us learn what to try in different places. And yeah, so I think those things make a fairly big difference. Yeah, those would be some of the factors I'd be pointing to in terms of moving it from the 1 in 7 succeeding to 6 in 7 succeeding. And that would be, I think that rings true of our experience in Australia. There's a few church plants we've walked alongside that haven't they're not going now. They've shut down in various ways, but it's the minority, very, very small minority rather than the majority.
I suppose just a pragmatic question. I've done, for example, a discipleship training school elsewhere, and I know how long that is. How long is the actual training that you guys run for church planters?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we do it in a couple of different ways. There's a 2-week intensive that we run as a sort of initial primer, get people going. And I mean, but that's too much to, in 2 weeks of just content, you need time to walk it out. We provide them a year-long or 10-month kind of cohort experience, which often is in at some point in that time, depending on the model and the stage things are up to the church plant. At some point in there, they're really actively starting to gather a team and maybe look for a venue or work out how they're going to meet and start doing that. But yeah, so often it's kind of ongoing alongside the thing that started, and we do provide other sorts of support in an ongoing way. Our coaching, the more one-on-one kind of input, we typically offer for a minimum of 2 years. So it's kind of, it's not like we try and give you enough at the front to really get you going well, and then it's that alongside and traveling with you, journeying together thing that we and so that's quite flexible in that you might be, and maybe it depends on your model, right? Our Korean planter was up and going from before he even joined, and then others it's afterwards when they sort of launch, and the year is very much a preparation piece, and it's valuable in both contexts.
So the cohort Chris was talking about is every week during school term. It's together with other planters with this training on Zoom weekly, and then you've got those intensives are sort of every now and then, fire hydrant kind of, learn stuff.
The leader team as well.
Yeah, so that would generally be, if I understand right, Chris, that'd be the leader or the couple, and with one of the key 3 things around that training being how they are equipping and raising up the team. We really appreciate your time, mate, and look forward to journeying with you in some way into the future as we explore and pray about this.
Yeah, well, my privilege, and really great to be with you.
Just one thing on the training is actually just answering your question as well. There is also training that we do that is once your church the church is established, and that training is also just a very excellent training for anyone who's in a church. It's called the Incubator Program. It runs the distinctives of city to city for 1 year, and you really get to be immersed in that and get a great lot of teaching as well. So, and then they've got sub-incubators as well, preaching, family dynamics, on and on it goes. So there's a plethora of training. Yeah.
So Cameron, Annalise and I did a quarter of an incubator last year. We did some sessions, and it was just absolutely fantastic stuff. So okay, so that's the end of the recording. That was James Duff there at the very end, who was just sitting in listening. He's the staff member for City to City in Perth and a church planter who preached at the Billabong recently. And so any questions that you have around all this, anything you'd like to engage with or that you're wondering about, would love you to share that question on the form on the page where you found this video, and engage with the conversations coming up and prayer meetings and things as we continue on this journey. Thanks so much for making the time to watch this, and I hope you have a great day ahead.